questions if there is. Well, as Tracy mentioned, my name is Justin Olson. I represent Legislative District 25, which is all within Mesa. So it includes the areas of Mesa between Gilbert Road and Power Road, all of Mesa. And then if you're east of Power Road, then it's the north half, and if you're west of Gilbert Road, then it's kind of the north half as well. So we can thank the Redistricting Commission for making the districts a little bit gerrymandered, and unfortunately wasn't in the favor of our party. But regardless, that's the district that I represent. I've been representing this district since 2010 was when I was first elected. And it's been a real pleasure to represent you in the state legislature. And as Tracy mentioned, I've been asked just to talk a little bit about what are my responsibilities in the state legislature, and then talk about how you as citizens can effectively engage your representatives at that level of government. I'm excited to have that conversation, to speak briefly about that, and then I believe I was asked to just talk about 5 minutes about that and then open it up to questions for another, was it another 5 minutes or 10 minutes? Or so we'll follow cues from Tracy on when it's time for me to sit down and move on to the next. I was born and raised here in Mesa. I ran for the legislature in 2010 because I was frustrated with the financial decisions that I'd seen the state make during the Great Recession. We had an unprecedented budget crisis, a $3.6 billion budget deficit on a $10 billion budget. And the state had turned to temporary solutions like new debt, selling the state capital and leasing it back for 20 years, spending all of the revenues raised in that debt instrument on salaries and benefits of that fiscal year. It's gone and paid for, and we're not seeing any of the benefit of that expense, but we're still paying on that, and we will continue to pay on it for quite some time. We also saw a record tax increase, both a record property tax increase with the reinstatement of the state equalization rate. We saw a record sales tax increase with the temporary 1-cent sales tax that was referred to the voters and passed. So we saw a significant increase in debt, saw a significant increase in taxes, the amount that the government was asking you to contribute for the same level of services in your government. And we also saw a significant increase in budget gimmicks, and that was something that really bothered me as well. Ways to get around the requirement that you have a balanced budget by using gimmicks that really did not balance the budget but made it look like on paper that it was balanced. And so that frustrated me. I ran on a platform making sure that we balanced the budget, that we did it once and for all. All of us in our families and our households had to make adjustments to the new realities of the Great Recession and reduce spending. We had to accommodate to the new circumstances, and we accurately expected our government to do the same. I expected our government to do the same, and the voters expected that as well. I was elected along with several others, promising to make that our priority, to balance the budget. So when I think about what are the duties of your state legislature, that's the primary responsibility. The primary duty of a state legislator is to pass a state budget, and it constitutionally has to be a balanced state budget. That's the only thing that the Constitution requires your state legislators to do each session, is to pass a state budget. We also do other things. We also pass other bills as well, but that's the number one responsibility. It is identified in the Constitution that we have to pass a state budget, and it actually does make up a significant portion of the efforts that your state representatives are involved in at the state legislature, and a significant portion of the impact of the decisions that the state legislature makes, and so the impact that the decisions have on you. We spend, as I mentioned, we historically had spent about $10 billion. We haven't hit that record level of spending since the run-up to the Great Recession, so we're between $9 billion and $10 billion, a little bit less than $10 billion. So, but it's a significant amount of resources, and the state's deciding how to how to spend those tax dollars. And it affects all of us, from our education system to our public safety, to our municipal governments, which are subdivisions of the state, which receive a significant portion of their revenues from state shared revenues. It also affects public safety and our prison system. It affects our highways and all of the state services that we benefit from. And so that's the number one responsibility. In addition to that, we also will change the laws. So if there is any state law that you come across that you feel like has a flaw in it that needs to be changed, then it is your state legislature that would make that change. And so a lot of times people are frustrated when they hear, oh, there was whatever number of bills that were passed at the state legislature in the last session, and we can get frustrated that they're at the number of bills and say, well, we don't need new laws. Well, most of the bills aren't new laws. Most of the bills are changes to existing laws, making it work better. If there's some sort of problem that we've identified in the statutes, then we want to go in and fix that. And that's certainly what I focused on, was repealing bad laws, doing away with laws that we don't need, making bad laws work in the way that they were intended to work, so they aren't causing problems for the economy, for individuals, and that they actually are functioning in the proper role, which is according to the proper role of government as contemplated under our state constitution and U.S. Constitution. So that's the role of your state legislature. Just talk briefly about how you can be involved in engaging your state legislature. I know I've seen several faces down at the state capitol many times and involved in many different ways. For those of you that may have not been involved, I'll just talk briefly about how you can be most effective in engaging your state legislature. There are a number of ways. First of all, you certainly can approach any one of your elected officials. It's most effective to go to the one, an elected official that you have elected, or where you live in the district, for whom you are a constituent. So it's most appropriate to come talk to me or one of your other state legislators if you have an idea for some change to a law. But sometimes you might happen to live in a district where your representative doesn't agree with you on a particular issue, and there's no reason why you couldn't go find some other state legislator and advocate for a change to the laws that you would like to see. And so you can bring an idea to any member of the state House of Representatives or any member of the state Senate and ask them if they would sponsor a bill to change a law. And that's something that any one of you can do. In addition to that, that might be a little bit intimidating or overwhelming to think of actually drafting the language or coming up with the idea of what you're going to do and bringing that to a state representative. But a very effective way to get involved in a way that doesn't require as much work on your part is to just follow what's going on at the state legislature. Read some of the bill summaries. Go to your district meetings where you hear reports about some of the bills that are moving through the legislature. And then go down to the Capitol and come to a committee hearing where the bill is coming up. And you can share your view on legislation. There's a call to the public before any bill is voted on in a committee hearing. You can stand up and share your perspective, say that you oppose this legislation, you support this legislation, and this is why. And it has a very strong impact when members of the community who don't have a specific interest in a bill, they're not going to benefit particularly from the bill, but just saying that this is good public policy, come down and say, this is why we think you should pass this bill or you should not pass this bill. It does take time to go down to the legislature, and a lot of us have requirements during the day of work and family, and perhaps you can't get down there during the committee hearing. You actually can sign up for an account to register your opposition or your support of a bill remotely. And you can do that from work, you can do that from home, you can do that the night before, and that opposition or that support will be on each legislator's computer when they look at the bill and they look to see who signed in in support, and most committee chairmen will read those remarks or the opposition into the record in the committee as well. So I think I've taken up about 5 minutes. Happy to talk about whatever other issues or topics you find interesting. There's a lot of different topics that come up at the state legislature. We can talk about any one of those. We can answer questions about the more political process, about how you run, how you get elected. Whatever topics you guys would like me to address, I'd be happy to address those.
If someone wants to make a comment to the representative, what form for that comment is most respected and cared about?
Excellent question. So if they want to make a comment to your representative, which form is most respected? I'd say personal communication. Like if you have the opportunity to call up the representative's assistant and get an appointment and come down and meet with them, that's going to get the most acknowledgement, because all of us are very busy. All of us in this room, I'm sure, are very busy, and your elected officials are no exception to that. And so if you can force them to make time on their calendar by getting an appointment, you've got a 15-minute or a 30-minute appointment to come down and talk with them. Now that's 30 minutes that they're going to be focusing just on your issue. And it has a significant impact because you cared enough to come down to the Capitol and talk. It takes a lot of work.
What's next best?
Yeah, so probably next best. Well, let me just tell you all of them that come in, and I'll kind of prioritize them, what I think are most effective. So you also can contact your representatives through email, through just calling and leaving remarks with their office. As I mentioned, you can come down to committee and testify in committee. I'd say that is as impactful as setting up an appointment and coming down and visiting with your representative face to face. So anytime you have that opportunity to show you care enough about this issue to actually come down and get involved and express that concern, then that means a lot. And I don't expect members of the public, each of us, to do that on every issue, because it takes a lot of your time, and that's why it has such a powerful impact. It's obvious that you've demonstrated that you've invested a lot of time and energy into this issue. Yeah.
What kind of participation rate do you get on an average bill? Is it like, do you get 2 or 3 people that show up every time? Is it, do you get dozens? How many calls do you get?
Excellent question. Everybody hears a question. He asked, what's the participation rate on every bill? Do you get dozens of people coming down and testifying, calling, emailing? What's the amount of input we receive from members of the public? It varies widely, very widely, from issue to issue. Many issues that are moving through the legislature are actually non-controversial, as surprising as that might seem, because all of the issues that we hear about are the controversial ones. And so there are a lot of bills that are moving through the legislature. There really are. I hesitate to call them technical corrections, because they actually have an impact. It's not just clearing something up, but in many cases it is clearing up what was the original intent, just trying to make something work the proper way. And so there are a lot of those types of bills, and we don't hear a ton on those types of issues. On your typical controversial measure, you'll hear more. But again, the quantity varies dramatically depending on whether there's a grassroots effort to encourage people to contact their legislators. And in that instance, if there is an organization that's got a large following, like we know them all, Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood might send out an email to all of their organizations, and I ran the bill to defund Planned Parenthood in Arizona. And when you run those types of when you run those types of bills, you hear from all of the following of those organizations. Other groups, like on the other side, like Center for Arizona Policy, who's a very strong pro-life organization, has a big following, and many times they'll communicate to their members and say, this bill is moving through the legislature, it's going to committee, on this day contact your legislator. And so then you'll, many times, you know, on a particular issue that, I mean, you might get thousands of emails, and they're form emails, and it's very clear that the person did not do much other than click a button when they got an email. And so getting back or tying that into the question about how much impact does it have, that tells me this person didn't put a lot of thought or energy or effort into sending this form email. Very likely they don't know much about this issue and may have seen, I wouldn't call it propaganda, but something that's leading them in one direction without giving them the full picture of what's actually being discussed. And so, but as far as, you know, having you know, regular citizens send a well thought out email that's not a form email, or give me a call, or come down to the committee and testify, it's really quite few. It's very few. So I mean, that empowers you all. It really does, because if you take that initiative to get involved, it has a big impact. You know, if you get to know your legislator and send him an email and say, hey, you know, saw that this is coming through, have some questions, have some concerns, it has a significant impact.
Do we have one more quick question? Okay, and then Danny and Bill, whatever.
He can have it. He can have it.
You're that anxious, then. I have a budget question for you, and I think we might have talked about this. We're one of only 3 states where all the federal funding goes to the governor and not through the legislature in our budget process. And we have about $10 billion that goes to the legislature, but the last count I had was 19.2 or 19.8 billion that the governor got directly, and he doles that money out. How do we change that so we have people that we elected that are responsible for the budget that actually decide where that money should go then within the parameters of federal requirements?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I agree with you that it is appropriate that the legislature ought to be appropriating those dollars. All the states but 5 have some input at the legislative level on how those federal dollars are spent. So it certainly makes sense that the folks who are closest to the people, who are appropriating the state budget, have the full picture. Where are these federal dollars being spent? And right now we don't. We not only don't have the ability to appropriate, but we also don't even have a complete picture on exactly where the dollars are going. How could we change that? We could change it with a simple bill. The problem is that bill would have to be signed by the governor, and Republican and Democrat governors alike have consistently vetoed that bill. I actually ran the bill my first year in the legislature because it was one of the first times that the Republican Party had a veto-proof majority. And this bill has always been a Democrat, a partisan bill as well. Democrats always oppose it because they've held the governor's office much more recently than they've held the legislature, and so they like having that authority resting with the governor's office. So we got a veto-proof Republican majority in the House and the Senate for the first time in I don't know how long, first time in recent history. And so I thought, well, this would be the one opportunity that we would have to override a governor's veto with this Republican majority and get this legislative appropriation of federal dollars that is an appropriate public policy. Unfortunately, we couldn't hold the Republican majority together. One of the Republicans voted no when we moved it out, sending a clear message that he was not going to support overriding the governor's veto, even though he had supported it before, even though Jan Brewer supported the bill when she was in the legislature, but she had vetoed it when she was the governor. So that's the only way that's a way that could be passed. The only other way would be to go around a governor by referring something to the ballot, but the likelihood of well, I mean, it could happen, but it's just uncertain. I think that's kind of inside baseball stuff to the average voter. I don't know if it could be successful at the ballot or not. So, excellent questions. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. It's a pleasure to visit with you, and thanks so much for getting people together to discuss these important issues.
Thank you. I hope you grab him before he goes out, because he's hopefully, we'll be very sad not to have him as our representative, and hopefully we will